Hey everyone, welcome to TRCOA's Behind the Groove. I'm John Stinson, owner of the Recording Conservatory of Austin, or TRCOA. Today I am going to be showing you guys through a mastering session, and basically how to master a song or a record to some degree, at least one way to do it. But first we're going to do our pro tip in under 5 minutes.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Cleaver and I'm an instructor here at the Recording Conservatory of Austin, and I'm going to show you how to import audio and import session data from a template in Pro Tools in under 5 minutes. Here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import audio into this blank session, and I'm going to do that with the hotkey Shift-Command-I, and it's going to open up an import audio window. You can see it says import audio here. I'm going to go into my downloads and I'm going to pull a melody out of here. Let's take this one right here. And what we can do is now I can play that song. Okay, here's what I want. Click convert, click done. And now it's going to show that it's going into my audio files folder, which is what we want to see, that it's saving to the session. And now I have audio in my track. Turn that down just a tad so it's not super loud. And now the next thing we really want to do, the big thing here now, is I want to import session data, which session data is taking information from another session and bringing it over to this session. So what I have done is I've created a vocal template for hip hop artists, and this is going to allow me to quickly get those tracks into the session without having to remake it every single time we do a new song. So instead of Shift-Command-I to import session data, I'm going to do Shift-Option-I, and it's going to open up a very similar window, but it says choose file to import session data from. Now, it's not going to let me import WAV files. We're going to be looking for PTX files. So I'm going to go in and just show you, this is an artist that I work with a lot, and I have an A-Room template already set here. So when I click into that A-Room template and I grab the actual PTX file, it's going to open and it's going to show me all the tracks in there. So I have his lead vocal, I have a hook track, and I have a feature. Usually if they have another artist coming in, and then I can bring the master in as well. And all I gotta do is just click on those and it adds them to a new track. Now on this template, I don't have anything recorded on there, so me importing or replacing existing playlists doesn't matter in this case because I have no information. But if you were pulling it from a session that has a bunch of you had all your IOs set up and all your information, but you didn't want to bring the audio, you just wanted to bring the blank tracks, you would have to come down to do not import over here on choose, and then you'd uncheck this clips and media. Because you'll see if I have it checked, like a lot of times you see like maybe these 4 things may be on, which is all our alternate playlists, clip gain, clip effects. If you just check clips and media, it turns all of those things off, and that'll let you import your tracks without any of the audio on them if that's what you want. Now if you're importing to have the audio in there, then you definitely want to have this import and replace existing playlists. But these are blank, so it doesn't matter. When I click OK, it now imports all of my channels, my will lead vocal, my hook, my feature, already has my headphone setups, already has my inputs already set up, and then I'm ready to go track without having to even build anything else up. Everything's already routed and I'm ready to go. All right, guys, and that is importing audio and importing session data into Pro Tools. So thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Welcome back. If you end up finding this content useful, please like this video. And if you're new, please subscribe. We do live feeds every week, or new ones every week. Also, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and ask questions as well. Okay, like I said before, we are going to go through mastering tonight. So I guess let's get to it. I'm going to switch screens here and start showing you guys the session. Okay, so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm basically going to go through kind of my process for mastering. You know, there's probably a bazillion different ways that people master out there. You know, the end result is generally going to be the same. Everybody's going to use different techniques. Some of these techniques are kind of aggressive a little bit, and there's probably some mastering engineers that wouldn't use some of these techniques, but I want to go through them and show you all these different things. This is actually, interestingly enough, a record that I mastered last week. So I figured I would, you know, take a moment and share it with you guys as we go along. So cool. All right, so So let's talk about the session for a second, and I'm going to try and go through this stuff pretty quickly so it doesn't take too long, because there's certainly a lot of little details. But the first thing that I do is certainly I bring in, so the thing is if you're just doing one song, you wouldn't necessarily have to do this, but obviously you're going to import your track into Pro Tools and put it onto a track. In this particular case, just in Command-Shift-I would do that. And in this particular case, they brought me a series of files, right? And all these files are in 882, I believe 24-bit. Yep. And so 882 24-bit. So that's great. You know, obviously what you don't want somebody to bring you MP3s or something along those lines that are, you know, data compressed. Really, any kind of compressed file I wouldn't like. They do have lossless data compression, and it could be in that format, which wouldn't be horrible, but I still would prefer an uncompressed WAV file. And in this particular case, of course, they have a relatively high resolution, right? 88 to 24-bit. And so that's great. So that's, you know, preferable format, right, that you're going to want it in. So for whatever that's worth. They did bring all their tracks laid out in that format. So that's cool. So the first thing I did was just import all the songs into the session. You can see they're all here at the beginning, right? In order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through 13. And what I did in particular is I then laid them out in order, you know, on the session or in the session like they're going to be, right? In order, kind of back to back. Now, I wasn't necessarily trying to do times between the tracks or anything like that. This was just so that I can easily go through all the tracks, play them all, change volumes, do all the things that I'm going to do, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But you can see that I did kind of spread them out throughout the session, or, you know, in the edit window. So yeah, okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing I did certainly was put an EQ on each one of these tracks. Interestingly enough, I also put a virtual mix rack there. This would be mainly usually for some sort of compression, but in this particular session, I didn't actually use any of these. They're just sitting on the track. So, and I'll kind of go through what that's all about. So a Pro Q is generally probably more what I'm going to end up using, mainly because, you know, these Pro Qs have dynamics in them, and I'm going to kind of show you what that's all about as we go through it. So the first thing I would do, right, bring in all the songs, make sure they're in the right resolution, bring in all the songs, and then lay them out in order. So before I do anything, right, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the general volume and tonal shape of each song is generally pretty close. This is not to mastering level, but to general, you know, in a general way to the ear, I want each song to be about the same. So let's go ahead and listen to this a little bit, and we'll kind of see what's going on. Okay, so right now these are going out bus 1 and 2, which is going through this multiband compressor. So I'm going to change that, and I'm going to send all this out. I'm using Option Shift. I'm selecting all the tracks, by the way. Just to kind of review selecting, I select the first one, I shift click the last one, it selects all of them in a row. Then when I use Option Shift, any track that is selected will change at the same time. So I'm switching the output to mix, which is going to change all those tracks to mix at the same time. If you wanted to select individual tracks, you can hold the Command key down and deselect or reselect certain tracks, just FYI. Holding down the Option key and clicking on a selected track will unselect everything or select everything as you go along. So, cool, so now they're all back out to mix. So this is the very first thing that I did before I did anything to the session, right, is I basically came through here and went through each song and just listened to try and make sure the volume of each one of these tracks at its loudest point, right, is similar, okay? And sometimes things that are like this, you're going to notice, like there's definitely some kind of interesting tracks on this CD, and the way they're mixed is definitely, you know, these guys mix their stuff at home, so, you know, it's done in the box from a home studio, from the artists themselves. So, you know, rough around the edges a little bit, and definitely you're working with For whatever it's worth. How things are mixed has a big effect on your ability to master things to a certain level, for whatever that's worth. But I'm going to listen through all these tracks just to check it out. So, just to kind of reiterate, what I've done here is I went through and adjusted the volumes of all these tracks, right, little by little, as we went through all that. So, for whatever that's worth. By the way, too, not only did they give me the 13 tracks on their CD, they also gave me 2 references that they wanted. You're going to notice I imported those 2 references as well, right, here. And what I did is I duplicated those songs over and over again for the full length of the CD. That's mainly so when I am referencing, I can click in at any point, listen to this song, and then listen to the reference song. And you're going to notice that as we go through. There's a lot of plugins that allow you to do kind of cross-referencing too that you certainly could use, but this is the way I did it for whatever it's worth. By the way, guys, feel free to, hey, what's up, Harrison? Feel free to ask questions, guys, in the chat. If as I'm going along, if I miss something or if there's anything you guys want to know, don't hesitate to ask. Cool. All right. So yeah. So anyway, I have the references in there as well, of course. So the first thing I did was just adjust all the volumes so that they're generally a similar volume. You're going to notice the reason we're going to do that is then we're going to be sending this whole package through a series of channels, and you need them to react in a similar way to all the stuff that we're going to do down the line, right? So if there was something that had some crazy difference in dynamics or a different tonal shape, or was a lot louder, then it would affect all the other parts of the signal chain in a different way, which would cause it to not react well. And obviously, at the end of the day, what you're looking for is a cohesive, concept, or let me say this a different way. You want the whole record to not sound exactly the same, but you want it all to work together. So when you play from track to track, the tonal shape, the volume, the overall dynamics is similar from song to song, so you don't have to turn it up, turn it down, brighten something, or anything like that. The whole record has a real smooth play from beginning to end. By the way, too, you're also in mastering trying to match that record to the best things that are out there, on the market right now. So that's why we have a couple of references in here to make sure that at least our finished product is going to be pretty close to some of the best things that are out there, right? Now here again, you are competing against you are dealing with whatever mixes you've got, which does affect mastering. Obviously, the better the mix, the better the mastering is going to sound if you do it right. And so, with this, we got kind of close, and you'll hear at the end kind of what it's all about. But nonetheless, obviously, the better the mix, the more you're going to easily be able to get to really great levels if it's mixed well. And a lot of that does have to do with dynamics, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so first thing I did was match volumes. The next thing after that I did is I did go through and I used the Pro Q to shape things, all right? If I thought something needed, and this is all relative, right? I'm listening from song to song, so if one song had a little more bass, or one song was a little brighter, or one song had some weird mids, or one song had something else, then I went through and I adjusted the Pro Q to kind of fix that. And I also used the dynamics element of this, so I might boost a frequency like this, but then crank down on the compression part of this, or the dynamic part of this, so that it kind of tames, it both boosts and tames, so it kind of controls that frequency and gives it some resonance, right? And so for me, these surgical EQs like the Pro Q3 is exactly what needs to be used at a point like this. So let's kind of look at some of those so you can kind of see what it's all about. So let's see the second song, right? There was a lot more low end in this song, so you can see I had to tame something, you know, kind of at this, you know, I don't know, I guess it's around 50 hertz thing that they had crazy thing going on. You can see also too that a crazy roll off in the top end. So I tried to give myself a little bit of sizzle and life, so we had some bite in the upper end, and just this frequency range up here needed a little life to it, okay? So you can kind of see what's going on there. Let's listen to this first one too, just a little bit. This was probably one of the better tracks. The low end needed a little bit more punch, but not a lot. This is only about 3 dB, and it's also being controlled, so it's pretty similar to the original. And I probably mimicked most of the other tracks off of this first one because it's obviously it's the one they chose as their opening track, and probably the one they like the most as well. So I kind of mimicked all the others a little bit based on that. Now this one was really different, right? And so I had some weird frequencies in the middle that were doing stuff. You can see I had to tame a bunch of things. You can see it's really jumping. There's a lot of dynamic things happening in different frequency ranges that are pretty crazy. So I really had to, you know, tame this one quite a bit as I went through everything. Probably one of the more, you know, crazy frequency curves. You're also going to notice too on a lot of these, you know, below 20 hertz. Right, I'm rolling off 24 hertz. Most stereo systems don't play below 20 hertz, and you don't want it taking up any of your, you know, kind of your volume bandwidth or your, you know, your ability to get things loud, right? So there's really almost no energy or any useful energy below 20 hertz, right? 20 hertz is really low. Even 25 is super duper low, lower than 808s and things like that. So you'll notice I do roll off things sometimes. You know, this one doesn't have anything on it. Let's kind of look at see what that one is and why I didn't put anything on that one. Nope. Yep, that's that one. I don't know why, but I guess I didn't do anything to that one. Didn't do anything to the next one, it looks like, which is interesting. Now this one had some really crazy drone thing in the low end, right? So I really had to kind of do some love to this, and obviously it needed some brightness in the top end, so I you know, brightened it up a little bit. Still, keep in mind these are relatively low amounts. 3 dB is a good chunk of decibels, but it's still not crazy, especially with the dynamic aspect in there, where you're kind of dynamically controlling things. Option Command W closes things too. So is it best to reference more at the mastering stage rather than the mixing phase? You know, I would say both, Quest. You should really reference all the way through. Remember, your references are gonna be mastered, right? So even when you're mixing, you're listening to a mastered track, so you kind of have to take that into account, right? But one of the things that's a big deal, that's a shortcoming on most of these mixes, however, is dynamic control, and it's dynamic control at every level, right? The kick drum, to the snare drum, to the bass, to the vocals, every little piece is dynamically controlled, and a great mix, you know, they do methods that get the dynamics into a really nice place. So then when you come to mastering, you're having to work a lot less to get it up to a certain volume or a standard volume and punchiness and loudness and consistency that you're going to need to get to at the end. So you're referencing, you know, when you're mixing is not going to be so much to make it sound exactly like it, right? But still, you want, you know, you want to try, right? You want to try and kind of come pretty close, because it takes some weight, a little bit of weight. You don't want it to be mastered, but you want it to be easy for your mastering engineer to get it where it needs to be. So, for whatever that's worth, hopefully that answers your question. But both is definitely the answer. You know, you're going to reference during mixing and during mastering. Okay, great. So we'll just, you know, listen through a few more of these and look at what they have going on here. Let's see what this one is. That's that one we've already listened to. Right? Let's just see what we did here. Right? Same kind of thing. I was kind of taming that resonant low end thing. little bit of extra in the top end, but you can see I'm using, you know, dynamic things most of the time to kind of tamper things down a little bit. You're also going to notice things like this. What I'm doing here, this is at about 120 hertz. This is very important. If I think there's not enough energy at 120 hertz or 200 or somewhere in that range, that's a big deal. And the main reason is because if everything's built down at 50, 40, you know, 60 even, then that's a problem because earbuds aren't going to play 60 hertz, right? So if your whole mix is built on everything from 60 hertz and down, you know, and then you have a lot of top end energy, but because it sounds great with a sub, right? 60 hertz going crazy sounds fantastic in a room where you have a sub. But if you don't have any lows or low mids, you know, or enough of it resonating, then what happens is when you play on earbuds or, you know, a computer or even on just something that doesn't have a sub sometimes, all those frequencies are gone and all you're left with is just a bunch of high-end energy that's not supported by anything in the low end. So you have to be real careful about that. So if you ever see a bump like this, right, it's because I think there's not enough in the lows or the low mids to support the whole mix. Right? So that's a really important thing. So be careful about that. I'm just going to make sure to refresh this in case anybody's asked anything. Cool. Okay, so let's just keep going through these just a little bit. And we don't need to go through all of them, but yeah, you can see I did some dips. Look at how much resonance I thought needed to happen in this mix. A lot, right? And so I basically, and it's still, but you can see this is 10 dB, so this is probably about, what, 6 dB? Yeah, 6.5 dB. So that's a pretty big boost. I must have really felt like the low frequency resonance stuff was not nearly enough, and I'm taming a lot of this high-end stuff. So come back to this one more time, right? What I'm doing here is I'm taking all the songs, matching their volume, tweaking the tonal shape of all of them and kind of the overall shape. And it's not to be perfect, but as close as I can get so that now when we start sending it through all the other signal chains, basically the multiband compressor and all the other things we're going to send it through in a minute are going to react in a similar way with each one of these songs. Because if one was a lot louder or one had a lot more bass or a lot more treble or a lot more, you know, just any crazy frequency, then it's going to, the next stages that we send it to are going to react in a different way. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do after that, right, is I'm going to send it to a multi-band compressor. So I'm going to hold down Option Shift and I'm going to go out bus 1 and 2 here. And that's going to take it to these guys right here, right? And you can see I've color-coded things just like Ben did yesterday in his mix, right? He color-coded different sections, and you're going to see I did the same thing here. I color-coded different sections. So now what this is doing is, and I'm just going to go through this. Let's go back to the beginning just so that we're kind of on that first track again, right? Now, what this is doing, right, is it's separating. I'm using a Pro Q to do this as well. It's a low pass, right? So that's my low frequencies, and you can see this is about 150 hertz and down, right? And then I have my low mids, and let's solo that. I'm holding down the control key, by the way, too. This is all grouped, so it would all move together, right? But I'm holding the control key down to, basically for it to ignore the group for a second, by the way. Command S to save. So this is the low mids. This is from 150 hertz, and these are obviously pass filters at a very steep curve, right? 96 dB an octave. And this is going up to 1K, right? And then... And I hand make these, right? You can get all kinds of different multi-band compressors out there, but I make my own and I use my own compressors in this way. So this is the high mids, right? So from 1K up to 5,000 hertz, right? And then the last one is 5K and up, right? And so let's listen to that, right? So this is 5K and up, right? Now, what that allows me to do is use a compressor for each one of those frequency ranges. So I'm gonna unmute all of them, right? And then I'm gonna go ahead and unmute my compressors, right? Now you can see the dynamics that are occurring here. So there's a few dB of compression on each one of these, right? So this is the lows, right? Let's go ahead and mute them all again, and I'll unmute this one, right? So now you can see this is what's happening in the low frequencies. So I'll bypass this. You can see what I'm doing here is a very low ratio, very slow attack, usually kind of a fast release. I think it's faster on some of the other ones. You're going to see I have a pretty fast release going through these. The low frequencies, I think my release was a little bit slower. Obviously I'm setting the threshold, so I have a couple of dB of compression, maybe 4 at the top, and then I'm making up for the gain reduction that I'm getting. So you're looking at about a 3 dB gain reduction in each one of these frequency ranges at the loudest places, right? So this is the loudest places in all these songs, and you can see this low end's getting pumped down pretty hard, but still, you know, it's up to 5 dB, but you know, most of the time it hovers around a half a dB, or I mean, a couple of dB, 2 or 3 dB. Okay, so let's listen to the low mids, right? Check that out. So to bypass that, okay, so you're gonna hear a little bit of a dynamic crunch. Now what's happening with this, right? The reason you do this is because the low frequencies, if they jump out, you don't want it activating a compressor on the high frequencies, right? Because if the low frequencies kick, and you push down the high frequencies, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do, right? And so low mids, they kick, you don't want the lows to get crunched, right? So what you're doing is at least dividing 4 frequencies so that you can control each one of those frequency ranges separately and do controlling in each one of those areas to add it all back together again. The blue bell curve in let's see, in your session, has a broad spectrum of frequencies, subtractive. Will that affect other frequency ranges? My bad, you answered just as I was asking about the frequencies. Okay, cool, yeah, so hopefully I did answer it. I'm not sure. Right. Maybe you were talking about the different pass filters, right? I think that's maybe what you're talking about. These filters are designed to separate the frequency ranges, right? This is a multi-band compressor. You have the low frequencies, the low mids, the high mids, and the highs. So literally, you know, you're passing only the low frequencies in the first band, only the low mids in the second, and then high mids and then highs. And then you're compressing each one of those frequency areas separately. Okay, so let's listen to this. We're going to do this a lot, okay, as we go through the other sections here too, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to this without the multiband, right? So all I'm going to do, I selected all the tracks, holding Option Shift down, and I'm sending everything back out of mix, right? So that's without the multiband right now, okay? Then I'm going to hold Option Shift down again, and I send it back all through the multiband. So let's listen to that again. I'm going to start it again from the loud section. So I know that's super subtle and probably hard to hear where you guys are, the difference. But let's do that one more time, or let's go to a different song. Well, let's do in this song one more time, and then I'm going to go to another song and show you there as well, okay? So let's do it here. I'm going to just keep playing. This is through the multiband, and this is out of the multiband. All right, let's do it again. So this is no multiband. Now this is with the multiband. So if you pay attention, right, there's going to be little bits of dynamic control and kind of presence in every frequency range, right? Even in the highs, high mids, each area gets pushed together just a little bit and tightened up a little bit. Okay, so there you go. So that's the multiband compressor. None of these moves Well, some of the moves are dramatic, but usually this is done in little stages that do little to little to little to little that build up to something huge at the end. And so you'll kind of see how that goes. So this is the multiband compressor. You're also going to notice I used impact. The compressors that I use are going to be SSL style compressors, solid state types of compressors. I also have on here the gray, the slate digital gray compressor, which is another kind of, potential one that would be good to use as well. I like impact a little more, for whatever it's worth. I played around with both and I like impact. But you could use either or any other SSL style compressor would work just fine. And just remember, when you're doing this, you're talking about very low ratios, very small amounts of gain reduction with a little bit of boost, right? And usually slow attacks so you can hear the transients, right? And you're not clamping down on anything too hard, okay? Cool. Alrighty then. So Option Command W to close all the windows. So the next thing after that is I'm gonna send it through what is basically a mid-side setup. Now I had a different seminar on this last time about stereo imaging and stuff like that, but this is it in action, in mastering, and so you're going to get to see this. Now the way this works, it's relatively complicated, right? The mid channel is this right here, and all this is taking both left and right, because we're going to bust this all out of 3 and 4 now, right? So I'm going to bust this out, 3 and 4. It's going to come into this whole mid-side setup, which is this whole green-brown section here, right? So the mid channel is going to be this 3-4, and you can see both left and right channel are summed together, right? So they're straight up. So this is basically a monaural signal, a summed monaural signal of your mix. Both left and right channel are doing the exact same thing, right? And understand that anything that's in the center is going to get amplified, right? So imagine if the left and right channel, any energy that is in both channels, when they're summed, is going to get amplified, right? And and anything that's only in the right or only in the left will not get amplified, right? Or it won't get boosted. So that's what this center channel represents. Then you have this little flip, what's what I call a flip at least. And you can see I have left channel and right channel, but they're both going to one bus, one output, right? And I'm phase flipping the right channel. Now this is a little bit complex, but just bear with me for a second. So what's happening is you have the left channel and the right channel, and then you're phase flipping the right channel and then adding them together onto one bus. So what happens is anything that's in the middle is going to be canceled because you're phase flipping the right. And so all you're left with is the energy that's on the left and the energy that's only on the right, only on the left and only on the right, on one channel with the right channel flipped. So that sounds pretty crazy, but that's what it is. You have the energy of the left channel, anything that's only on the left channel there normally, and then you have phased flipped in that same signal the energy that's only on the right phase flipped. So all that's on one signal. Sounds pretty crazy, but then what you do is you take that signal and you double it again, so you can see the inputs of these two channels, bus 7, right? And then you're going to phase flip the right channel again, so you're getting the original material for the right channel flipped into the right direction. Then you pan them hard left and right and you add them back to the mid channel and you get the original signal back again. And so I know that sounds completely insane, but what it allows you to do is it makes it sound pretty much like the original signal, same stereo image, and then you can manipulate the stereo image from the middle channel. So let's see what that sounds like, okay? So I know that it's pretty crazy even thinking about it, right? So what I'm gonna do first, so let's do this, right? I'm gonna mute the side channel so all you can hear is just the mid channel here, right? So that's both left and right summed together, okay? So for whatever that's worth, that's the mid channel. This is monaural. There's no monoing this. This is mono, okay? Then you have the stereo image stuff, right? So this is all the stereo image energy, right? Remember, it's since you have the left and the right, you phase flip the right, you add it together, that's this signal, right? And then it's doubled and phased flip again and then added back to the middle. And so you end up with only the image stuff, only stuff that's only right and only left. Interestingly enough, usually lead vocal is almost not at all in this stereo image, right? But they must have done something to make the vocal very, very imagey, right? So there's energy, probably some sort of stereo chorus or something that made it do that. But usually you don't even hear the vocals barely because the vocals are usually right in the middle of the mix and it's not a big stereo image. So, and nonetheless, this is the stereo image. So when you put them all back together, this is what it sounds like. So we're back to the normal. You can mono it too, right? Unmono it, and you're going to get that stereo image back. So let's listen to this, without the mid side and then with the mid side. And then I'm going to also EQ these a little bit, and that's even going to enhance it a little more. So here we go. This is with the mid side. This is without. No problem, Kate. Kate Osborne is in Australia, which is kind of cool, and watching mastering. So that's awesome. Good for you. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. So watch this. Right. So this is without the mid side, right? And so now what you're going to hear when I switch it back, you should hear a little bit of variation to the stereo image. So let's check it out. So this is without, now this is with. So I know it's real subtle, but if you're listening closely, you'll definitely hear it, okay? I'm going to do it again. This is with the mid side. And that's without. All right, so I'm going to do it one more time. This is without. That's with, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do on top of that, which is going to enhance this a little more, right, is I'm going to EQ each one of these sections. Now, this is for me, is to primarily enhance the stereo imagery even more. So you could do all kinds of things. You could dynamically control the mid channel differently than the stereo image. You could EQ the mid channel different from the stereo or from the stereo side and all that kind of stuff. So for me personally, what I'm going to do, I'm going to dial in a little bit of mids, low mids and mids, and I felt like these tunes needed that. They needed some brilliance in the mid section, right? So let me bypass that. This is without the EQ. And that's with the EQ. And I'm actually listening to the stereo image. Sorry about that. I was listening to the wrong thing. So if you didn't hear anything, then that made sense. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to bypass it. So this is without the EQ. This is with the EQ. Here, let's do that again with the loud section. So this is with the EQ. That's without the EQ. So pretty dramatic change. Now remember, I'm only doing maybe a dB or two, but that's still a lot. And it ends up being about 4 dB because I'm doing about 1K here and about 8. So it's maybe 1 or 1.5, 1500 hertz or something. So it's quite a bit in the mid range. So let's listen to that one more time. So this is without the EQ and with the EQ. Cool. So you can almost definitely hear that pretty clear. Now the thing about that is, This is a fidelity EQ too. It is solid state. This is a mimic of a solid state EQ, but it's also not a precision EQ, sort of like the Pro Q is, right? This is designed to literally just surgically take frequencies and push them around, right? Not to resonate. These EQs, however, the PSPs and ones similar to that, they're designed to be sort of like a Neve or a 1073 or something like that, where when you turn up a certain frequency, it resonates that frequency, right? It's like you're putting it through circuitry. So this is more of a resonance type vibe is what we're going for here. And so now what I did to the side mics or to the stereo image, so now I'm just going to listen to the stereo image. And by the way, I have these linked, so for whatever it's worth, in at least Pro Tools Ultimate. I'm not sure if you can do it in regular Pro Tools, but you can link two channels. You'll see when I bypass, they both unbypass. So you can do that in groups, right? And so I have that set up this way. So all I've done with this, I'm going to bypass. All I've done is boost a little bit of high frequencies from about maybe 2K and up. 2200 hertz. Here we go. So you'll hear a little bit of brilliance. And that is it. That's all I've got there. So Option Command W closes everything. So let's listen to that all together with the EQs, and then we're going to listen to it without the mid-side and with the mid-side. So this is with the mid-side. Now I'm going to hold Option Shift down, select these tracks, hold Option Shift down. So obviously now you're going to hear a pretty dramatic shift in the stereo image now and the mid-range focus, right? Because I'm doing some pretty significant, manipulation at this point to some of the frequency shapes. So here again, I'm going to go Option Shift and go out bus. Here, let's wait and go back to the same section. So I'm going to go Option Shift out 2, 3, and 4. This is without the mid-side. This is with the mid-side. So it can kind of give you an idea. A pretty big difference now between the different sections, or between without the mid-side and with the mid-side. Let's listen to another section, okay? I'm just going to listen to another song, right? So I'm going to hold down Option Shift. I'm going to go out Mix Output. That's without the mid-side. Or actually, oh, you know what? That's weird. Oh, I had this selected, sorry. Let's undo that. I was like, that wasn't what I wanted. Okay, so now it's going through. So that's with the mid-side. Hold on a second, let me get this right. So here again, this is with the mid-side. This is without. Right? So pretty big shift. This is without. This is with. Okay, so you should be able to hear that. So may I also use parallel compression to get these effects in the mastering level like I would do in my mixing phase if a session is sent through email? I'm not sure what the email part is about. Now, Quest, the thing is what you want, it doesn't matter if it's sent through email, it just matters the resolution, right? So you want something that's at least 16-bit and 44.1 16-bit at least. And then if you can get something at 882 24-bit or even higher resolution or something like that, then that's better. I don't think you really need anything above 88.2. So that's the question about resolution. It doesn't really matter whether it's sent through email or not, right? It's just the size of the file might matter, but Google Drive, you can send all kinds of different size files. That's irrelevant. But parallel compression, sure, yeah. You could definitely use parallel compression. I'm sure there's a lot of mastering engineers that like to use parallel compression. I'm actually not going to use parallel compression in this particular session. But that's a common way to, kind of, I am going to use another function that's kind of similar to that here in a little bit, and it's the Oxford Inflator, because it kind of brings up quiet stuff, which is kind of what parallel compression does, because you're taking an uncompressed version and then bringing it together with a very heavily compressed version, which basically takes the quiet stuff and lifts it up rather than raising the overall volume. And so it thickens the mix, right? And so yes, that is a good method. Okay, so let's keep going here. So so that's the mid side, and I don't want to get too long here. We're already at 45 minutes. So let's keep cruising through. So it's always amazing how time flies. So cool, that's the mid side section. Now I'm gonna take this and bust this out 5 and 6. That's going to take you guys over here. So what I'm doing in this particular case, right, I'm going to run it through the dangerous 2-bus. So I'm coming out of the system in this next stage. The 2-bus has a really great sound. Now you could run it through all kinds of different gear. The 2-bus is just relatively transparent, but it resonates and creates depth and stereo imagery and things that I really like. So I'm running it through this box just to get some analog warmth and sound on it a little bit. So you're going to get to hear that in a second. I have this set to plus 6 dB on the input, and then on the output I have it plus 2 dB on the output. You're going to see here, anybody that, any of you guys that use the studio here, there is an output of the 2-bus here. I'm sending out of 1 and 2 that automatically goes to 1 and 2 of this. By the way, all the way 1 through 16 are the 1 through 16 inputs. So if you go out HP drums, that's going to take you into the, it'll also take you into, of course, our monitoring system, but it's also going to take you into the first 2 channels of the dangerous 2-bus. Then all you have to do is take the output of the 2-bus and go back in. And I'm going back into the Lavry. The Lavry is a mastering converter. I'm at 24-bit input, and then of course I'm using desaturation. So not only am I using the tone of the 2-bus, I'm also using the tone of the input of the Lavry. So for whatever that's worth. So that's that. That's what's happening. So let's look at what that sounds like. So I'm taking the mid side, the mid and the side channels. I'm going out HP drums, so it's going out of the drum channel, going into the 2-bus, out of the 2-bus, into the Lavry. And then that's this input here, okay? All right, so let's listen to what that sounds like. So this is through the Lavry, through the 2-bus. This is without it. Nope, I didn't do it. Sorry. That's without it. Let's do that again. This is without it. This is with it. All right, so if you can hear that where you are and you've got some good speakers, you're going to hear a little bit of resonance and a little bit of stereo depth that's added to it. So let's try that one more time. This is with it. This is without it. All right, I'm going to back up again. I'm going to go back to that first session too, because I think, or that first song, because since we've been using that as a reference, that's a good one. Okay, so here we go. This is just without the 2-bus. Here we go. Now we are going to go to with the 2-bus now. So you can hear a pretty big shift there. Here we go. This is with it. This is without it. All right, so you should be able to hear that. So I'm basically using that analog box to create a little bit of depth and a little bit of resonance, right? Cool, so let's go ahead and keep cruising on so we don't go way over, because we're already pretty far over at this point. So I'm gonna go back out HP drums. Now I'm going through it, coming in the Lavry, okay? All right, so just to recap, right? We set up all of our volumes initially. We EQ'd each track a little bit so they all sounded pretty similar. We went through the multi-band compressor, then from the multi-band compressor into the mid-side setup, and then we're coming through the 2-bus and then coming out mix. Now we're going to come out bus 5 and 6, and I'm going to go through this chain of different things. The first thing I'm going to do is hit a master EQ on the whole deal. All right, that's the master EQ. I brought a little high end. This is a fidelity EQ, so it's going to like resonate in every frequency that I can do. You can see I'm doing tiny amounts, right? 2 dB, 1 dB, I guess 3 in the low end, but which is quite a bit actually, but still very, very small amounts in general. All right, so I'm going to bypass it, unbypass it. So still pretty big difference, right? These fidelity EQs really do quite a bit. Now this is where I'm gonna get kind of nuts, because the two things that I'm really doing now is I'm going to do sort of like what Quest was talking about with the parallel compression. I'm going to use an inflator, which is going to basically take the quiet stuff and boost it up, right? And then right after that, I'm going to take a limiter and squash it down, right? So I'm basically taking the dynamic range and really crunching it down in these last two steps. All right, so this is the Oxford Inflator engaged. This is without the inflator, right? Now it does raise the volume, but more than anything, what it does is it takes the quiet stuff and gooses it up, okay? Then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the limiter and bring it up to the loudest volume that I want it to be. Now, with that being said, this is pretty heavily crunched at this point, right? Now remember, the whole record's not gonna look like that. That's gonna be the very loudest sections of the song, of the record, right? Is what we were listening to before, so. But you can kind of see what the end result looks like. Cool, that would be a more normal amount. You can kind of see that movement there. That's more what it should look like. So that can give you a little bit of an idea. Now then what I would be doing after that would be to go through in detail, right, and try to make sure and reference my references in great detail, right? Volume of that one was out of control. So, but basically I would go through back and forth at this point and make sure that I matched my levels. And then lots of times too, I'll go back through at the very end and I'll actually then, you know, take the original track, one of their tracks, and just put a limiter on it and make sure that what I've done to it kind of enhances it to, you know, that what I've done really genuinely is enhancing it. But I think that's generally it tonight. I know I whipped through it pretty quick, and hopefully you guys got some good information out of it. but this is basically the process for mastering. Like I said before, you could always just do one song, but certainly if you're doing a multitude of songs, you do that first stage. If you were only doing one song, you still might EQ it and do some things and some love on it at the very beginning, but that has a little bit less relevance. Definitely you have to do that whenever you have a bunch of songs and you have to have them work together. Because doing the multi-band, they need to react similar. Then when you get to the mid-side, everything's got to sound, when you do boost a certain EQ, you're doing it to the whole record at that point. And then when you hit the 2-bus, you're affecting the whole record. When you're doing the limiter and the final EQ, it's hitting the whole record at that point. So you want it to be pretty close at the very beginning to what you want it to be, so as you send it through the whole signal chain. Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. If you like this content, of course, please like the video, and all that good stuff. And if you're new, please subscribe, because we do new ones every week. If you are enrolled and you do have questions about this stuff, don't hesitate to hit me up. You can always text me and call and book time with me if you'd like. You can also email and text Ben. He's always available too if you have questions. If you're not enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information. Also, please post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you guys on the flip side. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later. Adios. Bye-bye.